Lonesome Lands podcast, the Lonesome Report for the week of July 8th. 4th of July's over. Big, beautiful turd of a bill gets signed into law. And here we are. Lots to talk about, I guess. I guess first off, I will be speaking July 15th, South Dakota Stock Growers Association Convention, Rapid City, South Dakota. Go to South Dakota Stock Growers Facebook or social media or website to find all that information. How you go listen to me talk. It'll be in the evening. I think 7 o'clock at night or 6 o'clock at night. I can't remember. And Shad, what are you doing? You're in Colorado talking somewhere?
I'll be on July 19th. I'll be at the Colorado Independent Cattle Growers Association's state convention, annual convention in Hugo, Colorado. I will be speaking about beef and liberty.
All right. Come support actual independent small farmer rancher organizations. Two good ones. Here we go. Shad just listened to the press conference of Brooke Rollins. So I guess we'll just start off with that. Brooke Rollins update.
So the Brooke Rollins update comes first. All right. Well, Brooke Rollins and some of her friends in Congress and really the whole administration, some of the, Pam Bondi was there, Hegseth was there, Nome was there, some Congress people were there. They rolled out what they're calling the 7-point plan for national farm security. And I just literally finished listening to it. I'm really not sure what the 7 points were because they didn't go over them. But the main point is China, right? We got to protect ourselves from China. What I got out of this, Jim, was that no other organization in the United States representing independent agriculturalists have ever talked about food security being national security, and that's what we all talked about everybody talked about on this meeting this morning in front of the Department of Agriculture. RCAF USA is the only one that's ever been pushing for all of this security. So I'm glad that it was rolled out in the way it was. You and I have reported on the 2 Chinese nationals, actually 3 Chinese nationals, that were caught smuggling in bioterrorism. And so this is really what this was, is to counter all of that from China, counter Chinese nationals buying farmland all over the United States. Bondi come out swinging, talking about pesticide tracking and biosecurity. She specifically pointed out that pesticide tracking from Mexico was very, very important because they have been pushing in illegal pesticides from Mexico, which I thought was very strange that she would bring that up because we just opened the border yesterday to live cattle imports from Mexico. So I thought, that's kind of weird. Nome says
it's almost like Mexico can't be trusted, but
it's
send us your
almost like
cattle.
yeah, except in the way of live cattle imports. We can trust them because they have guaranteed us that they are protecting themselves from or doing a better job of mitigating the screwworm outbreak. Yeah. Okay, so there's that.
All right, moving on. Great job.
Yep. Secretary Rollins did come out. She had some questions on mass amnesty. Now, she did come out today and say, under no circumstances does President Trump or I support mass amnesty. That's been a big topic this week about, if they're going to allow this mass amnesty for farm workers, hotel workers, construction workers. They say, no way. We're going to do it strategically. There will be no mass amnesty, but we got to focus on automation and getting Americans back to work. She said there's some like 30 million Americans, able-bodied Americans that are receiving assistance that could go back to work. We need to get them back to work. So I liked what she had to say about that. She touched on the H-2A program just a bit, but I'm going to say her understanding is as good as mine on that because she put that over on the Secretary of Labor, and I guess that lady will be talking about it today. So I'm anxious to see what the 7 point plan is. I mean, they did not roll out 7 points. They just talked about, the National Farm Security Plan that would protect really American farmland from being bought by foreign adversaries, including and at most China.
Right.
So we'll see what that brings out. Um, hey, yesterday while we're on the Rollins deal, uh, Undersecretary Stephen Vaden
Hold on
was
one second.
finally
Can you
okay.
hold
Go
your
ahead.
thought?
Yeah.
Because Pam Bondi was there, you said?
Yes.
When was this announced?
This was
This press
announced
conference.
just this morning
Yeah.
is when it was announced.
Pam Bondi had a rough day yesterday.
Did
Today
she?
is Tuesday. On Monday, she said there is no Epstein list,
Yeah. Yeah.
um, which was weird. And so I guess this is her first event, and she wants to come out. It almost seems like, huh? I wonder what she's. Let's talk about farming, guys, um,
Uh,
and not the pedophiles list that was on my desk, but now it doesn't exist anymore. Anyway, go ahead.
she did take a lot of heat on that, and I have
Yeah, I
not
mean,
followed.
it's like,
I haven't followed that story, but I will say this: they did say that list was on her desk, and now it doesn't exist, and all this stuff. And I don't like going into the depths of all that nonsense because to me, that's all. Uh, it's not nonsense, but it's just not my wheelhouse. So I don't like to talk about it because I don't understand it, and I don't. It's not a part of my perspective. My perspective is agriculture. So
yeah. I think uh,
anyway.
I think Jesse Kelly made a good point when he was like, "Yeah, big surprise that the intelligence community can completely make something vanish." You know,
Well, the thing is I think it goes along with what everybody is texting me about. Shad, President Trump is backing up on all of his promises. That's the main text and the main communication I get from everybody is that they're backing up on their promises, and I think it's a problem.
welcome to
So
politics.
welcome to politics. Anyway, Undersecretary of Agriculture Stephen Vaden was finally swore in. This should have happened 8 weeks ago, but he was sworn in yesterday. He is no stranger to USDA, and I think he's a pretty good guy. I'm anxious to meet the guy. I was also anxious to meet Secretary Rollins, but she's made that very clear that will not ever happen. And so the Stephen Vaden, we have some mutual friends.
I think you're probably scaring her.
I'm not scaring her. She ain't
You,
scared
you
of
might be a
nobody.
little over anxious.
No, I want to meet this Stephen Vaden. Everybody tells me he's a super good guy. I think Brooke Rollins is a good gal. I just don't think she's. I think she's got a lot on her plate, and I'm
It's just
not
like
gonna.
Trump. She's got the wrong people talking to her.
I'm not. I'm not even saying that. I'm just saying.
I am. I'll say it. Texas
I'm.
cattle
I'm
feeders are in
saying.
her ear, and she's
I'm
opening the
saying
border.
anyway. So Undersecretary Vaden has been sworn in. That's a good thing for American agriculture, I do believe. Okay, the screwworm deal. Yesterday we opened up the border. It's just a stair step opening. We're gonna evaluate each border as they open them. This is not popular, and it's only popular to corporate agriculture. Independent producers are not happy. Funny enough, I really thought that they would hit the board hard when they opened that up, and when they announced it, they did hit the board hard. It went down about $6. It has now recovered all $6 and put about $4 back on above that. So yesterday, as they opened the board or opened the border, uh, the board was up $4 and it's up again a buck 50 this morning. So I don't know if they're playing with it, just trying to mess with our minds,
Of course
but
they are.
that's kind of funny. But anyway, we knew that about her 5 point plan to protect us from the screwworm in coming out of Mexico. I just don't think it's enough. I think we've made a mistake by opening the border so quickly. I think that we'll just have to wait and see how it rolls out. But I just think it's corporate agriculture that has a hold on her. Texas Cattle Feeders Association come out this morning and said on their Twitter feed and said we are happy about the ability to get back to work. So that kind of shows you what that was what that was all about. It is a phased reopening. Surely that they will stay on top of that. We talked about them going to remodel that Mexican flyworm facility. It will open in 2026. We're going to build one in Texas that will open in 3 years. We're kind of behind the ball here. And I will tell you that there have been 23, according to reports out of Mexico, there's been 23 humans that have been infestated with the screwworm. 13 of those are still in the hospital. That's from a June
Good grief.
26th. Yeah, that's from a June 26th report out of Mexico. That's not an American deal. That was out of Mexico. I think something that bears close watching. You know, they say that if we were to be here in Texas, if we were to be infested, take a hit on it, it would hurt the beef industry at about $2 billion. And then, of course, that would flow into every other aspect and create billions of dollars in losses. That's just cattle. That's just the livestock industry. We're not even talking the hunting industry. They say up front. I saw a report where it said up front, the hunting industry, the deer industry, would take a $9 billion hit immediately. That is massive.
Yeah. Well, you can't really doctor deer very well.
Well, anyway, that's pretty scary. So that's the issues that I'm bringing forward today to you on the Lonesome Report. If you have any questions, call me.
We'll go back to Amnesty deal. That was what was in the news, and you hit that. And like Trump came out, and he was just talking during a speech, which is where that all that comes from. He said we're not going to deport illegal farm workers, right?
Correct.
And then this morning they said, well, we're not giving amnesty. But it goes back to, I mean, there's a lot of different things. What I tweeted this morning was the only migrant labor in my neighborhood is on gigantic corporate dairies and gigantic corporate hog confinements. I know that it might be a little different in like the vegetable industry or fruit
Fruits.
industry where
Yeah.
there's a lot of hard labor that you just I don't know how it works, but yeah. So that was my initial thought, but then also I think if you're Newt Gingrich when he ran for president, I think this was years ago. I think it was when Romney got the nomination. He had this whole plan of if you have lived here for a certain number of years, like 10 to 20 years, and you've paid your taxes and you're a good American citizen and you're loyal to the U.S., then you should be able to not get deported, right? Or I don't know what his plan was exactly. It wasn't become a citizen, but it was just, we're not going to throw you out. And I know people like that, right? Like I know a guy who is, he told me he crossed illegally. He told me he's a legal citizen, but I wasn't sure about that because he told me a story of crossing illegally. He worked in California and then he came over into the Midwest and worked construction. He's built his own house. He has his own family. He encourages he works with a lot of people from Mexico and he encourages them to learn English and to, become a part of America.
Assimilate.
But he's frustrated that they don't. Like there's a lot of guys that they just don't want to learn English and they don't care. They're here to work and send their checks home. But like that guy, I don't think he should be thrown out of the country because he has been here and paying taxes for who knows. I mean, it was like the 80s, I think, when he crossed.
Mhm.
So I don't know. It goes into a lot of things.
Well, I think it all comes down to the issue that we have to abide by the law. As American citizens, we have to abide by the law, and so should they.
All right.
I am not against immigration. I am against illegal immigration. I think they need to assimilate to our country. And what the massive open border did from the Biden administration, which was an absolute mess. It invited not just the good people seeking opportunity and freedom, but it invited all of those who seek to squash opportunity and freedom.
And
And
who,
so that became enmeshed together, and you couldn't identify one from the other. And so that's where we're at now. Now we have to identify one from the other. Who is here to help our country and do the things that Americans do, and who is here to destroy our country? And so they, because of that, Jim, we can't just allow this mass amnesty.
well, it,
We have to vet these people.
yeah, but I don't even know that we should even be talking about it until we get rid of, like he said, we're going to deport the criminals first, and then I would say the welfare. Like there's a large number that are here and they were getting welfare. According to Thomas Massey, this big beautiful bill continues the welfare for illegal immigrants. And they're getting on food stamps and all that kind of stuff, and they're just kind of mooching off of the U.S. taxpayer. They should go next. And then let's get into.
But
Then
how
we
do
could
you
talk about the
differentiate
actual
those?
employees. What?
I mean, how do you differentiate those?
Well, if you
That's
don't
my
have a
question.
job, that's what I'm saying. Like, if you're cashing government checks and don't have a job, let's deport them.
How do you define that? Because if I'm cashing a government check and I know I'm fixing to get deported, I'm going to get me a real quick job on a farm. That's what the
Okay, well,
amnesty
yeah.
problem does. Is everybody now all of a sudden, and Trump said under no circumstances will there be mass amnesty. That's great. But if there were to be, then everybody becomes employed by a farmer or a hotel or construction. There's ways to cheat that, and that's why we have to vet them very, very carefully. I'm not against it. I just think I have to live by the law, and so should they.
Okay, that's really all I had on any of that stuff.
Okay.
So, the one thing I told Shad before we get going on this, I feel like has been pushed harder than ever in the past week is this beef on dairy thing. And it has the big, and as you look into it, it has a massive impact on what we talk about every week, which is the cattle industry and the independent farmers and ranchers that raise cattle. And I think it's important to think about how it's going to work and look at who the people are who are pushing it. Um, because I really feel like this is, and a lot of people, Brett Kenzie, we've talked a lot. He talks about this is the key to vertical integration. There are big players in the cattle industry who want to be vertically integrated, and what that is, we're talking about just the the end user, like the Tyson Foods, the big four meatpacking corporations control every aspect of the beef production. Right now, we have independence. From that, right? Like we have an open competitive market and sale barns and different things like
Supposed to.
that. Vertical integration is they want to control every aspect of it. And there are people down that supply chain line who are all in on that idea of vertical integration because that's how they see the future. I talk about a guy who I listened to a podcast. It was Trey Wasserberger's podcast. He was talking to this guy. It's Bion, which is the main, I think, methane digester company. And he said the hogs and chicken have went indoors, and it's time for the cattle industry to go that way also. And if you look at beef on dairy and the methane digesters, and those are the people who are into all of this carbon, um, the carbon credits and all of that kind of stuff. They are the ones who want to take the cattle industry indoors, meaning a more confined, a more confined
Production
system.
model.
Yeah, and that's how they see the future going, and they want to push the industry there. And we've seen NCBA over the past week come out their cattleman to cattleman show, which I was going to try and watch. It's very hard to watch how stupid it is, but I was going to try and watch it before I got on here, but I wasn't able to. But it seemed like it was dedicated to beef on dairy and promoting beef on dairy. They had these beef on dairy feedlot people on there talking about how great the system is and how it works and how wonderful it is. They had a beef checkoff ad come out this week promoting beef on dairy. And
Oh,
this to if you are a beef producer, this is your direct competition. These are dairy owners raising beef cattle and flooding them into the beef market. What's your thoughts on the beef? I mean, they have to pay checkoff dollars, but still, it's like, why would the beef checkoff? Why is all this getting pushed right now?
well, because it's what you just said. It's a key to the end of the independent production. It's vertical integration. And under vertical integration, you can look at it in the hog system and in the chicken system. It's all about uniformity. It's all about predicting data under uniformity. They can't do that with us now because you have the Charolais breeders, you have the Angus breeders, you have the Red Angus people, and we all have a different market. Everybody wants a different product. Everybody wants to produce a different type of animal, and that's the beauty of America. Is that diversity, but under a controlled system, and that's what this is. A march to vertical integration is all about uniformity. It all has to be the same. They have to predict the data. They have to predict the productivity of those animals. And Kee Jim, who's built that you know huge, massive feedlot on concrete in Nebraska, which I think is totally ironic that we're talking carbon and methane and environmental issues, and then we put, how many square miles of concrete down.
A full square mile.
So it's
But
640 where we have to go ahead. What are you showing me?
I was gonna say, like, Drovers did an article about Blackshirt feeders is what Shad's talking about. It's
Right.
the biggest feed yard in the country being built, full square mile of concrete, methane digester, which according to the that Key Jim is if that methane digester isn't allowed to get the tax credits and sell their carbon credits, the whole system does not work. So it's
Correct.
based on the climate change BS
Right.
or the system doesn't work. But Drovers did an article about this. What is this? August of 2024. And I talked about this and I went to IBAND, which is Independent Beef Association of North Dakota. They invited me up and I talked about this and kind of studied up on it back then. But in Drovers, I felt like they did this article, and it's like they just kind of said the quiet part out loud, is what people say nowadays, because it's on the cover, closing the loop, and what that means is if you're an independent cattle producer, you're not in the loop. The loop's closed to you.
Correct.
Um, and they show a diagram showing the loop being closed to you. What they have is URIS, which is the semen company. So how beef on dairy works, the semen company sells to the dairy. The dairy AIs all their dairy cows, and they get their calves. The calves go to New Mexico New Can LP, and then where they're raised like a bucket calf, in these little huts. If you've ever seen them, it looks like millions and millions of huts. I'm sure it's thousands, but if you see them from above, they're just these little huts with a calf in each individual pen. And then once they're able to feed, they go to the feedlot, and then this data company, you know, this EK, which is the data company, and then they share the data with the semen company, and the semen company continues to what they call genetic evaluations. So they're continuously trying to improve the genetics to improve these beef on dairy cattle to create more efficiency, as they call it. And as we went from the Angus Association issues where they're the Angus Associate. This is a big Angus deal. Mainly, the semen are like these big, high dollar Angus bulls that are going to these dairies. And as we've talked about in the last couple of weeks, the Angus Association has now partnered with the Bezos Earth Fund to create a genetic evaluation for methane, meaning how much methane your cattle create. And what obviously is going to happen in the future is the lower methane cattle will get carbon credits, or they're the ones that this that will go into this closed loop. And it's all very telling because this was August of last year where they kind of just let everything fly on what they're trying to do. I highlighted a few things here. It says Blackshirt feeders near Hagler in the far southwest corner of the state will have a capacity of 150,000 head, all standing on a concrete pad covering a full square mile, replete with an accompanying biodigester, meaning they're going to digest the methane and make natural gas. Or I mean, I need to look into more of how that works. But main thing is tax credits. They get tax credits. And to go back to the big beautiful bill, a lot of these carbon type tax credits were cut, or their deadlines were moved up, or things like that. But when it comes to manure and these methane digesters, that was extended, and those tax credits were continued, which goes back to, we talked about how NCBA is pushing this bill, and they're talking all about the tax credits and all this. But this, these people have way more. The NCBA likes to promote that kind of stuff. It's how these bills work. They have one little thing that they think's great, that the independent people and the populace will love, and they push
Hmm.
that. But then on the
Hmm.
back end, they're pushing this deal to
Right.
extend the tax credit for this methane digester, which goes straight into the climate change hoax. What the President
Correct.
Trump said, climate change hoax. Um, and so they're just continuing it based on that. And it says, another highlight here is, this is a game changer. This enables progress like we've seen in poultry and swine. If you don't have the loop with the data, you can't make the progress. So these people involved in this black shirt feeders are promoting it like it's going to turn the cattle industry, right? He says enables progress like what we've seen in poultry and swine,
Yeah.
meaning
Vertical
vertical
integration.
integration. That's the progress that they've seen in poultry and swine. That's, they're saying the quiet part out loud. I actually know a rancher who toured this black shirt feeders as it's getting kind of put together, and they aren't. I don't think they had the beef on dairy in there yet, or at least they didn't tell them that, because I told him about this article and how they said it was going to be all beef on dairy and closed loop system, and they were
Hmm.
like, "Oh, I didn't know anything about that." They toured the whole facility, and they didn't. They thought they were going to be buying feeder calves, you know.
Well,
So, but here they say, it's the most environmentally friendly feedlot on the planet.
yeah, I don't get that.
Yeah, a square foot or a square mile of concrete.
Exactly.
But it says these efforts will help change the narrative about beef production and make it a much greener process. The whole this was back. Biden
Yeah.
was still president when this article was written, so they were all pushing this green. The best the best line comes from it. Another one is, it's ironic that an offshoot of the dairy industry might be the catalyst that could drive the beef industry toward expanded use of animal ID and data capture.
That's
I
right.
don't know how that's ironic, because the dairy industry is all in on that EID and data capture stuff. I mean, it just is what it is. But then our calf's best buddy, Neville Spear, who they describe him as an industry consultant, and who he really is. He writes these articles all backing up in Drovers and now in Beef Magazine, and he is pretty much a corporate mouthpiece of these of industry consolidation. That's his main goal, and to get he writes for these magazines to get producers on board with this vertical integration model. And here he's quoted: "There's more opportunities all the time for beef producers who are willing to embrace participating in a specified supply chain." Spear explains, "It means giving up some independence, and it
Ah,
requires more accountability, but ultimately willingness to do so will likely also establish new opportunity to maximize the value of genetic and management inputs made at the ranch."
got a
It
lot of
means
knowledge
giving
for
up some
somebody.
independence.
Yep.
I mean, that goes straight into Angus Association, right? And what they're dealing with right now. They're trying to
Well,
they're trying to get those guys to give up independence and to maximize the value of genetic, meaning their EPD. methane EPD stuff and all of that stuff.
Whoever thought sustainable development would come this far this quickly? All this is controlled production, right? And you're either gonna, this is sustainable development at its core. You're going to get on board or you will not get in the market. And Kee Jim said yesterday in an interview that there is no market without the carbon market,
I
right?
think it was said a while ago, but I'm going to try and play this. Brett sent us this clip, and so this is Kee Jim. Let me see if and
Is that
I think it Catherine Bernhardt. He's on a
mm,
podcast, and he's the kind of the push behind this Blackshirt feeders, and
hmm
he was inducted into the Cattle Feeder Hall of Fame. He's Canadian, I think.
yeah.
Yeah, and so I'll try to get this to play.
And is that this project, the economics of it,
Yep.
do they work even in the absence of anyone participating in a carbon market?
Absolutely not. Right. If you look at natural gas, and it's ran up here over the last few days for reasons I'm not sure of, barely over $3 an MBTU, whereas the price of the RNG stuff is typically tenfold on the low side, right? So,
Okay.
feedlot is $25 to $30 an MBTU, and the dairy stuff quite a bit higher than that. Some say 45 to 60. I mean, it's multiples
Wow.
of the actual burn value of the product. So the carbon market, right, because of scarcity, has created, it's a market driven thing to be sure, but the only reason why it exists is because on the ESG side, large entities have decided that they're going to become carbon neutral.
Yep.
If that goes away, then the price for the stuff will come down dramatically, right? So that's a risk that's inherent in the biodigestion world. But we believe that the whole business of ESG is not going away, right? That's regardless of our underlying philosophies, right?
Sure.
This train has left the station, right? If we believe that we're not going to try to decrease our carbon footprint, I think you're living in the wrong world, right? You're in denial of what's happening around you. And economically, that if people maintain those ideas, it's going to hurt them.
So you guys are well positioned.
We think so, right?
Yeah, and so what he's talking about there is the price of natural gas, which is what this biodigester creates. And if you're just selling the natural gas, it makes no sense, and it doesn't work. The only way it works is with the carbon credit, and the tax credits and all of the BS that goes into the climate part of it. So what Brett said about that, because Brett is a smart guy and he's a cattle feeder. So this is what he put on. He said this video and the beef on dairy push and the genetic component is on a trajectory to intersect perfectly with the Angus Association methane grant. The players all have their heads together. Brett is referencing himself as just a small independent cattle feeder. Brett can blow his brains out buying calves, trying to compete with the corporates with special deals until his equity is gone. Brett doesn't have a methane digester. Groper, meaning the cow calf guy, so it's me, Eric Groper and Brett and Shad are on this text, but he says Groper doesn't have the new low methane genetics, meaning the independent cow calf guy doesn't have the low methane genetics that these feed yards want. The seed corn guys hybridize seeds, so you have to buy a new seed every year. That is coming to the cattle industry if you want to market, meaning they are going to create this methane EPD that you can only get from them, meaning this Urus and these semen companies.
Wow.
And it says mandate EID and they will just shut the non-compliant polluters down, meaning that's how they will track all this is through your EID tags. And if you don't do what they tell you to do and have your low methane cattle or be involved in these programs, then you're not going to be involved in this system. And so that is kind of where we're at. But the big, beautiful bill retained all of that stuff. And it's weird how this timing goes, where it's like NCBA went like, they said they promoted the big, beautiful bill. They had their California cattlemen standing behind Trump promoting this big, beautiful bill. Well, almost at the same time, they're pushing this beef on dairy stuff. And then the big, beautiful bill gets signed. What comes out of it is I'll read to you. I was looking up last night. I told Shad I could hardly sleep because Brett got me going on this deal, and I was already kind of looking into it. But there's a law firm that there's so much in this bill, which is why we've been critical of it from the start. There's too much in it to understand what's happening. Right. And that's why they're able to come out. That's why NCBA is able to come out and say, well, see, we've lobbied for these tax, there's no more debt tax and we're going to save the farm. And those are all good things. But I think what they lobby for is this stuff that they can slide in the back. And what this Frost Brown Todd attorneys, and apparently there are attorneys that specialize in these tax credits for this carbon BS. And what they talk about for the methane digesters, they say, in a move to standardize emissions accounting, the proposal bars the use of negative life cycle emission rates for most fuels starting in 2026, except in the case of animal manure-based fuels. For those fuels, the Treasury Department is directed to issue specific life cycle greenhouse gas emission rates tailored to the type of manure, feedstock, dairy, swine, or poultry. Further life cycle emissions calculations would be required to exclude emissions suitable to indirect land use changes, thereby aligning more closely with international sustainability standards. Meaning we're going into more of for this manure issue, we're aligning more closely with a United Nations European type of sustainability standard. It's insane what is happening, and how they were able to get this in there specifically for this Kee Jim guy. I mean, I think, and operators like him with these biodigesters. This is the cattle industry has went into this big, beautiful bill and made sure that these tax credits continue. You just heard him say that this feed yard does not work without that biodigester and the carbon credits and how that all works. And now we have this big, beautiful bill, which made a specific life cycle greenhouse gas emission rate tailored to the type of manure. And there's a lot in there that, you almost have to have. This carbon issue is a whole industry, like, and they have their own acronyms, like what they call the indirect land use changes, which is IDLUC or something. That's what they put it out as. And an indirect land use change means you're taking ground used for food and creating this fuel with it. And so the land use changes. Well, you're not using that land for food now, and so you're tearing out Amazon rainforest. But I mean, it all gets so complicated that it's hard to understand.
Well, it's a convoluted and complex mess, and I don't mean to speak over you, but I'm so mad right now. I am just so mad. All of this, I have said for years, is interwoven. It's all interwoven. And if we put this on this march to vertical integration in the beef industry, where uniformity is key, and he said himself, it's time to go the chicken way or the hog way, more confined animal feeding operations, and so that puts less independent producers on the land. We already have too few, and then we have national ag organizations lobbying and promoting all of this policy that promotes sustainable development. And the whole key to sustainable development is to get control of the land. And so now we have this march to where we see, like in Colorado, where their goal is more wildlife corridors. And we just heard Senator Marshall talk about corridors. This is all sustainable development talk. And the public-private partnerships have a massive, massive connection to this. It's all about controlled production. And we talk about in this meeting this morning in front of USDA food security. All we're doing with all of this is making us more food insecure, especially on a regional and local basis. And so the buy-in to the carbon to the lie, what you're talking about, what you always talk about.
which is what Trump campaigned on.
Trump said
And JD
climate change is
Vance.
a hoax.
I know.
I mean,
But because we get these gigantic bills, the lobbyists are able to slide their BS in there, which is exactly what this is. And if you're wondering why we're so mad, it's because the people that we represent, that we come on here every week and talk about small independent farmers and ranchers, they're the ones getting pushed out. They're the ones losing on this deal. When that guy talks about how he can make so much money on the natural gas that's created from this biodigester, he doesn't, cattle prices don't matter as much to him because he's making money on this carbon scam. Where the guys like Brett, who's blowing his brains out buying feeders, what he means by blowing his brains out means he's destroying his
equity.
Cattle prices are so high right now. He's destroying his business by buying cattle and not having that extra income from a biodigester. And I talked about it last week where there was a guy who testified in the Senate saying regulations destroy, certain regulations destroy small business because Brett Kinsey can't afford a biodigester.
Right. Independents can't afford it.
Independent, cattle feeders cannot afford this kind of stuff. It's only the guys who are able to pour concrete over a square mile of land.
It's corporate agriculture at its finest.
That's and they are excluding all independents. That's the closed loop.
Absolutely.
They're keeping independent cattle producers out of the loop. And that's what, I feel like this is where we're going with this podcast. If you don't like what we're talking about now,
scroll on.
Because there has to be a voice against this, and there really isn't right now. People explaining this and
Jim,
getting the word out.
This is a voice of freedom and liberty. And that's what all of this that we're talking about kills. It kills freedom and liberty. The great thing about America is that we have the opportunity to create our own market where the consumer calls. That's what's awesome about this. But what these regulatory reforms and these policies, this sustainable development policy is it's creating this aura of where you buy in or you don't get a market. Right? That's exactly what it's doing. And it's getting more complex, more convoluted all the time. It's hard for the independent producer or independent consumer to understand where we're going on this. But what this ultimately is it's a market taker. It's not a market maker. It's a freedom taker. It's not a freedom maker. That's what this is. And ultimately, I can't speak for you, Jim, but I speak for me. This is about freedom and liberty for me. This is about a free America to produce how we see fit under the Constitution of the United States. And what we're getting here is just so much power because of the corrupt lobbying system. I still say we can have lobbying. Don't let them pay for it. It's just bad.
And for cattle producers, it's, we've kind of banged the drum on NCBA for so long, but I don't know how you can be a rancher. I get that they want to be part of the cool kids club or whatever and go to convention and have fun and all that stuff. But I don't know how you can support this organization. I just cannot.
Well, it's not just them either. It's all of those organizations who are uplifting corporate power. And we know who they are. They know who they are. And I don't understand if people want to stay on the land, because ultimately this is a land issue. This is all about access to land and natural resources. That's what it's about. Because they don't want us to have the global oligarchy or the global cabal does not want us to have access to our land. Because what does land represent? It represents freedom. It represents liberty. It represents open and competitive markets. And they don't like that. And so this is what they're trying to delineate right now. That's why I don't understand where independent farmers and ranchers are still putting their money towards these organizations that are actually, we often say that we are paying for our own demise. And that's ultimately what we're doing. And if Brooke Rollins and Undersecretary Vaden truly understood freedom and liberty in America and food security, then this stuff goes the opposite direction.
Yeah, that's what's so frustrating about this bill is this whole thing could have just been ended if they would have stopped these tax credits and came down harder on this carbon credit BS, which is what they campaigned on.
He promised us he would.
Yeah, which
The
he
climate
did on
change
some,
hoax.
and it was like he doesn't ever want to see another windmill built in the U.S. He said that, but what came out of this bill is, well, as long as you use U.S. suppliers, build all the windmills you want. And you can build all the windmills you want with the foreign suppliers as long as you start construction before December of 2025, meaning December of this year. So there's going to be a giant push to get as many up as they can with foreign parts by December. But to go back to the cattle deal, if you want to kind of see what did I talk about how they pull the calves off day of? The day after they're born. So what Shad's talking about on land use, if you're looking at this beef on dairy thing as the future, you won't need land because all these dairies are very confined and they're going to AI these cows and they'll have the calves. And how they explain it here is we supply the semen and Alta or Gen X distributes it to a dairy, and then the dairy signs a contract with Kee Jim Farms, who is the guy we heard talk earlier, to sell those calves as either day olds or after a growing period. Then they are shipped to the feedlot for finishing. And so you don't need land when you AI dairy cows. Cows have the calves. You pull them off a day after they're born and you stick them in a little hut in a confined area. You bottle feed them or bucket feed them until they're old enough to eat grain. And then they go straight on to a square mile of concrete where they're fed out and finished. You don't need land for
to
that.
their life's end.
And that's that they love that idea. They love that we don't need range land for raising cattle.
But at the same
and
time,
they see
you
that
look
as the
at-
future.
Yeah, at the same time, we look at sustainable development under the Global Livestock Initiative at the UN, and we're talking about, animal health and safety, human health and safety. Really? I mean, are we breeding for structure now for these all concrete feed yards? I mean, it's going to take a different structure on an animal to sustain that, right?
And also one thing I brought up in North Dakota is if you look at the hog industry, which they have changed the breeding structure there so that these hogs just sit in a pen in these buildings, and that's how they're raised. And look at what happened in California. They said, the California people said, we don't like that, right? As far as this Prop 12 deal, and it's more based on animal welfare. Well, what's going to happen when PETA comes out and sees these calves pulled off the cows a day old, stuck in a hut, and then moved to a concrete feed yard? I mean, the consumer doesn't like that. I mean, that's what, in the end, the consumer is not going to like that. I'm just telling you, I'm not being an animal, they'll say I'm an animal rights nut or whatever. They've already called us that. But I'm just telling you, you talk about freedom for the producer, but it's also freedom for the consumer. As all this industry goes this way, the consumer is not going to have that freedom of being able to choose how their beef's raised.
Well, and I'm not against confined animal feeding operations. I'm not.
Well, no, but it goes
I'm against
into
Go ahead.
such a that CAFO. What all does that entail, right? Like that's just a broad term. Like I grew up, we had a 350 head feed yard in my backyard pretty much. Is that a confined? I mean, some people would say that's a confined animal feeding operation because they were in a dirt pen and we fed them every day.
Well,
I'm not against that either.
The problem is, Jim, is God dang it, this leads to more concentration.
Right.
What we've done is we've allowed this concentration to group this power together. And this power wants all the profit. And the profit makers are the freedom takers, right? That's what they are, because they have so much power. And that's the problem that we're seeing here in this march to uniformity on beef on dairy. That's what this ultimately is going towards, is getting people getting the food system more concentrated, which is the opposite of the America First policy. Because if we learned anything in during our COVID days, was that concentration is bad for food production. It's bad for the consumers. It's bad for the markets. It's bad for all of these things. But now, because of this sustainable development model, which Angus Association is signed on to, NCBA is signed on to, Farm Bureau is signed on to, all of these people are signed on to, we're actually marching more quickly toward the demise of the independent farmer and rancher, which gives the consumer less choice. See, consumers need to be in on this with us.
Yeah, 100%.
Because it's taking their freedom.
We need them
too.
more than ever.
I mean, I know I sound mad and radical, and I don't mean to sound that way, but we are on a precipice of something extremely dangerous for the greatest nation to ever live on the face of the earth, America, the freest country, the beacon on the hill. This is a very, very dangerous precipice we're on.
But if we want to end the conversation on a positive note, eyes are opening, right? This Angus Association was the gift that we never knew we needed. But
eyes are opening.
This Brook Hill Angus guy who's writing an article every day, he is opening my eyes even more.
Yes.
And I'm learning from what's going on. If you're not following Brook Hill Angus on Facebook and you're a cattle producer, you need to go on there and read all the stuff he's put up in the last few days.
Yes.
Because, and there is, I mean, it gets deep into the big names in the cattle industry want to control every aspect of it.
Yes.
And that's what the Earth Fund, that's what this closing the loop, that's what all of this is leading towards. That's what the NCBA going on cattleman to cattleman and pumping this beef on dairy, talking about the future and how all this is. That's what it's all about. And you're right.
It falls right into EID traceability. All of it does.
Yeah. And more and more people are waking up and realizing, and that's the positive note. And hopefully, you know, as I was thinking about this, I'm like, okay, they just did this big, beautiful bill, but we still do need a farm bill. How, you know, maybe there's a way of cutting this BS out through a farm bill, but we got to get the word out, and we got to get consumers.
We need to get to Harriet Hagman on that. I don't know. I am imploring independent producers who truly love this nation, who truly love liberty and freedom, to start studying this.
All right. Share the video. If you're able to watch this and you're like, this is important information, please share the information. And like we said, continue to share Brook Hill Angus's post, Brian Palmer's post, these Angus guys who are smarter guys than us. I'll say that. That's one thing that's also encouraging. It's like these guys are smarter than us. They're able to do better research or you know, similar research, and they're figuring it out and helping kind of everybody's kind of getting him, just like Brett. I mean, I'm reading his quotes because he lays it out better than I can, especially coming from where he is as an independent feeder. He sees the writing on the wall. So there's that.
I couldn't agree more. I'm sorry I get so.
No, like I said, I laid up tossing and turning all night thinking about this stuff because I read that deal about the tax credit in this big, beautiful bill, right, at like 11 o'clock last night. And I'm like, how did this happen? Like NCBA got in there, and I mean, the big corporate livestock industry, could have been Farm Bureau also involved. I mean, we know who writes bills. It's the lobbyists and the staffers. And Ethan Lane is the main lobbyist for NCBA, and his wife happens to be a director of the staff in Congress. So, I mean, to me, and that's not something I brought up a lot because I don't want to bring families into it. Yeah. But if you're a lobbyist for big corporate ag, and your wife is the director of the staff for the House of Representatives or whatever it is, that seems like a conflict of interest, right? Because the staff writes these bills, and you're the lobbyist, and your wife is directing the staff. I don't know.
It's certainly interesting.
Something that should be talked about, but I haven't wanted to talk about it that much because it's, you know, I don't want to bring personal family things into it, but
it's
how is this getting into the bill? Farm Bureau, NCBA, they have their lobbyists and their staff members that they get to write it into the bill.
Come on, independent farmers and ranchers.
All right.
You got to step out of it.
Moving on. Probably to a more depressing subject. The
What could it
floods.
be?
The floods in Texas we're gonna end on.
Yeah.
Um, I guess you're the Texan.
I really don't have much to say on it. I'm watching a little bit of it on social media and on the news, and there's so much. Even in that, there's a lot of division, and there's a lot of talk about cloud seeding and weather altering. And for me, none of that matters. I mean,
Well, it matters, but
well,
right now it doesn't
at this
matter.
point, it doesn't, because we have had, I think this morning, over 100 people bodies have been recovered, and it's just a tragedy on every level. And the flood came. It's nobody's fault. It is nobody's fault that these people were swept away. Whether you think it was the mismanagement of a weather forecaster or whatever it was. I mean, we don't have control of that. And
Well,
those,
is it?
now wait a minute, let me finish. I'm telling you right now is not the time
Right.
to do
I
all
get
that
it.
stuff. And whether you believe it or not, and I do believe in weather modification. I've seen cloud seeding work years ago when they first started it right here in North Texas, and it will create a pretty heavy downpour. I don't know if that happened. I have no idea, but what I do know is these families are going through the worst tragedy. Think about all them little girls at that camp. What was it? Camp Mystic, I think. And those people are hurting. And you have people that were, we have people in our own industry, in the rodeo industry, and in the ag industry that have disappeared. I think they did finally find. There was a family of three, a little boy and his mom and dad, that were at a youth rodeo over the 4th, and they went down there in their little Capri camper and spent the night on the river, and they were washed away. And they found them yesterday, and that was so sad for our industries. And but the loss of life is so massive. And I don't know, Jim. It's just a very sad situation, and I think that we need to give them all the help we can give, emotionally, financially, food, water, whatever works for you. I think we need to help them. And RCAF USA, and I represent me, but I will tell you that we will do what we can to help. It's a very sad situation, and I think the devastation, just the physical, tangible devastation of the landscape, is just enormous. Like, they'll be forever cleaning a lot of that stuff up. And if you've ever been in the Texas Hill Country, it is very, very hilly, and there is no way for the water to spread out like it is in North Texas. You just can't. I had 7 inches of rain once this spring, 2 5-inch rains, and it just kind of spreads out here and goes down the river. When that happens down there, it can't get away to spread out. So it kind of envelops down those valleys, and that's what happens. And it's a tragedy. It's nobody's fault. Stop blaming people. Stop doing all this stuff right now. It's not the time. It's the time to be respectful and empathetic, and that's where I'm at on it right now.
Well said. But and the time will come. There's more and more information coming out about what's going on, and I think this cloud seeding rainmaker guy I think he's going to be back on the Sean Ryan podcast. So I think by next week there'll probably be way more information, and maybe that'll be the time to talk about it. I think we talked about weather modification on the very first episode
Did
of
we?
the Lonesome Report, because there was that hurricane in North Carolina.
Yeah,
And I said,
that was
hold
bad
on, hold
too.
on. We don't want to be that kind of podcast. And then I got so many emails and texts about, have you seen what they do? Or, all the cloud seeding stuff. But yeah, that's really,
No,
I
I
don't know.
I know I know that they can do these things, but it's just, I don't know. My heart is out for those. I just can't imagine losing my own son. Sending him off. Like, I won't
Yeah.
let my kid. I don't let my kid go to any camp, overnight camp.
Right.
I'm never going to do that.
Yep.
But the the possibility of losing your kid, there's nothing worse than losing your kid. And when they said there was, like, what was there, like 27 little girls missing, or 23, that's just staggering, staggering. tragedy. It's hurtful.
Yep, total bummer. All right, well, that's about it, I'd say, for this week. We good?
I hope we're good, buddy.
See you next week.
Adios.
Let us know what you think, I guess. Oh, and go to lonesomelands.com, click subscribe.
I really don't think anybody has a problem letting us know what they think.
Well, yeah, but I like to hear it. Yeah. If you're a YouTube commenter, never mind.
We appreciate the support. By
Yeah.
the way,
Love the engagement.
go get you some merch,
Yeah.
right?
Or just send your money to the Texas flood victims. Maybe that'd be a better sign out. See you next week.
Adios.